It started with a scream. Not the kind that comes from danger, the kind that comes from fear mixed with assumption. "Stop him! He's stealing!" Heads turned inside the Westbridge Mall, that polished marble maze of perfume counters, glass storefronts, and weekend shoppers pretending to be important. And at the center of it, frozen, stood 17-year-old Elijah Brooks, a tall, quiet black teen in a gray hoodie, holding a brand-new iPad still sealed in its box. He wasn't running. He wasn't even moving. Just standing there wide-eyed like someone who had accidentally stepped onto a stage he never auditioned for. "Put it down," barked a mall security guard, heavy-set, red-faced, and ready to perform. "Hands where I can see them." Elijah blinked, confused. He'd just bought the iPad, receipt in his pocket. He'd saved for months working at the auto shop after school, but none of that mattered now. The crowd formed fast, phones out, whispers starting, judgment spreading like spilled ink. "Another one trying to rob the store?" someone muttered. "Where's his parents?" another said under their breath. The store manager, a woman in pearls and pressed fear, pointed a shaking finger. "He was looking around the counter," she stammered. "Then he just grabbed it!" That was a lie, but lies always sound louder when people are willing to believe them. Elijah raised his hands slowly. "Ma'am, I paid for it," he said, voice low but steady. "You can check the receipt. Don't move!" The guard shouted, pulling his taser halfway from its holster. The whole food court went silent. Even the piped-in Christmas music seemed to die mid-note. A mother covered her child's eyes. A man in a suit muttered something about thugs, and Elijah just stood there, heart pounding, breath short, skin crawling with the heat of everyone's gaze. He wasn't angry yet. He was scared. Scared in that old familiar way his mother had warned him about. The kind that doesn't come from what you've done, but from what they've already decided you are. I said, "Put it down." The guard barked again, now closing the distance. "You think you can just walk in here, take whatever you want, and play innocent?" "I didn't steal anything." Elijah's voice cracked, desperate. "I paid for it. Check the register. Ask the cashier." The guard sneered. "Oh, I will. But you're not going anywhere till the cops get here." He grabbed Elijah's wrist, hard, too hard. The box dropped and hit the floor with a thud. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave of permission. Permission to watch, to judge, to film. A woman's voice said, "Typical." Someone else laughed quietly. The second guard arrived, younger, blonde, eager to prove himself. "Got him?" "Yeah," said the first. "Think he's got something else in his pockets." "Empty 'em." "I'm not—" Elijah tried, but the older guard cut him off. "Don't talk. You had your chance." They shoved him against the glass wall of the store. His reflection stared back at him, scared, small, but still trying not to cry. He heard phones clicking. He saw the little red lights of people recording. "Sir, please," he whispered. "You're making a mistake." "Yeah?" the guard said, smirking. "Then maybe next time don't act like a thief." A murmur ran through the crowd, a mix of discomfort and silence. No one stepped in. No one said, "He's just a kid," because in moments like these, silence always feels safer than truth. A few feet away, the cashier, a young woman with dark hair, peeked out from behind the counter, holding something in her hand. The receipt. His receipt. But before she could say anything, a police siren wailed outside the glass doors. And the crowd parted like a sea of fear. Elijah's heart sank. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he knew what could happen next. He'd seen videos. He'd heard names. Names that started with headlines and ended with hashtags. The older guard turned to the approaching officers with pride, like a man who'd just saved the day. "We caught him red-handed, officers," he said. "Tried to bolt when we confronted him. That's a lie." Elijah burst out, his voice trembling. "I didn't—" "Quiet," snapped the guard. "You can explain down at the station." The taller of the two officers, gray hair, cold eyes, looked Elijah up and down like he was a problem, not a person. "Got ID?" he asked. Elijah nodded weakly. "In my pocket. Don't reach for it." Another shouted instantly, hand already on his gun. The crowd gasped again. Elijah froze, hands trembling in the air, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, I'm not a criminal." That word hung in the air like smoke. Criminal. It didn't matter that he was honor roll, or that he volunteered at the community center every weekend, or that he'd been accepted to a pre-college STEM program. Right now, he was just a criminal, because someone had decided he looked like one. The officers closed in. One reached for cuffs, and just as the first cold click of metal touched Elijah's wrist, a black SUV screeched to a stop outside the entrance. Doors flew open. Men and women in dark suits and earpieces rushed in like a storm. Mall security backed away instantly. The air changed. It was electric, sharp with authority. The lead agent flashed a badge so fast the crowd couldn't even read it. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," she barked. "Step away from the boy. Now." Everyone froze. What's going on?" stammered the guard. The agent turned to Elijah, and her tone softened. "Mr. Brooks," she said clearly. "Are you okay, sir?" "Sir?" The words sliced through the silence. People looked at each other, confused. The officers stepped back. Even the store manager's face drained of color. The agent put a steady hand on Elijah's shoulder. "We're so sorry, sir. We tried to reach you earlier. Your device pinged before your briefing." The crowd was silent. Phones still rolling. Mouths still open. Elijah blinked, barely breathing. "Briefing?" he whispered. The agent nodded. "Yes, sir. The operation's been moved up. You're needed at HQ immediately." Then she turned to the guards, her voice now cold steel. "Who authorized you to lay hands on a federal consultant?" The guards stammered. We didn't, we thought, you thought wrong," she snapped. "And I'd advise you to lawyer up." Gasps, murmurs, whispers spreading like wildfire. The boy they'd just called a thief was being called sir by the FBI, and in that moment every cruel assumption, every whispered judgment, every smug smile fell silent. Elijah didn't gloat. He didn't even speak. He just looked at the guards, then at the woman clutching her pearls, and quietly said, "You never even asked my name." The agents guided him toward the exit, forming a wall between him and the chaos behind. The camera lights followed. The whispers grew louder, and somewhere deep in that stunned silence, the world had just met Elijah Brooks, the teenager everyone called a criminal, until 10 agents called him sir. Outside the mall, the afternoon sun hit the black SUVs like stage lights. The crowd pressed against the glass, phones still up, desperate to capture one more second of the scene that had flipped reality upside down. Moments ago, Elijah Brooks was the suspect. Now, the same guards who called him boy were standing frozen, blinking against a truth too heavy to process. The lead agent opened the SUV door. "Inside, sir," she said, voice low and respectful. Elijah hesitated, his hand still shaking from where the cuffs had grazed his skin. "Ma'am, what's happening?" The agent looked him straight in the eye. "You've been compromised, sir. Someone leaked your location. Headquarters needs you now." Elijah's pulse thundered. "Leaked? I was just buying an iPad." "Exactly," she replied. "And whoever tipped off those local guards wanted this scene to happen. They wanted you humiliated." She nodded toward the sea of cell phones still pointed at the entrance. "They wanted it viral." Elijah's chest tightened. "Why?" The agent leaned closer. "Because you're not supposed to exist publicly, Elijah. At least, not yet." The words hung in the air like a code he hadn't been briefed on. He slid into the SUV, and the door shut behind him with a heavy finality. Inside, the vehicle was silent except for the faint hum of encrypted radios. One agent handed him a secure tablet. On the screen, his own face from mall security footage. The words unauthorized exposure glowed red beneath it. "Ma'am," he whispered, "I'm just an intern." The woman gave a faint smile, the kind that hides more than it reveals. "Interns don't get level 8 clearance, sir." He froze. "Level 8? The drive was short, but every second felt stretched. Like time itself was trying to figure out who Elijah Brooks really was. They pulled into an underground lot beneath a nondescript federal building. The concrete walls swallowed every sound, every question. When the doors opened, 2 more agents stood waiting. "Welcome back, Specialist Brooks," one said. Specialist, that word hit different. He wasn't just Elijah anymore. He followed them down a corridor lined with biometric scanners. Retinal checks, voice pattern locks. At the end of the hall, a heavy steel door hissed open, revealing a glass-walled control center filled with glowing monitors and maps of digital networks. This wasn't just any office. This was the Bureau's Cyber Intelligence Division, the place where America's most classified cyber threats were monitored and neutralized in real time. And Elijah, the criminal from the mall, was part of the team. "Sit," said the director. A woman with silver hair and the posture of someone who hadn't slept in a decade. "We've been tracking a breach from overseas. Your algorithm caught it before the mainframe even flagged it." Elijah sat slowly. "You mean the neural net I coded for packet interception?" "Yes, it saved us," she said flatly. "But now the people behind it know who wrote it." The room fell silent. Elijah stared at the monitors, each one displaying scrolling lines of code. "So, the leak wasn't random?" "No," the director replied. "They wanted to discredit you publicly, to make you look like a criminal before you could testify next week." "Testify?" The agent from the SUV stepped forward. "About the data laundering network you uncovered in Zurich. The one tied to international banking and political donations." Elijah's throat went dry. That case had started as a school project. He was supposed to be analyzing open-source security protocols for his senior thesis. But somewhere in that code, he'd found someone, using AI systems to launder billions through charity fronts. He'd reported it quietly. He never expected the FBI to call, and he definitely never expected to be the reason a billion-dollar operation went dark overnight. Now it made sense. The humiliation, the recording, the way everything had escalated too fast. It was a setup. They hadn't just tried to embarrass him. They were trying to destroy his credibility before he could expose theirs. Elijah sat back in his chair, exhaling shakily. "They wanted me on the front page, but for the wrong reason," the director nodded. "Exactly. And thanks to you keeping your cool, the world just watched 10 agents call you sir. That's going to be harder for them to spin." He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had just been twisted behind his back. "So what happens now?" The director turned toward the wall of screens. "Now, Specialist Brooks, we fight fire with truth." She tapped a key, and the mall footage replayed, this time from their internal feed, not a shaky cell phone. Every angle, every insult, every lie. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "this footage will air, unedited, with your full credentials cleared for public release." Elijah's eyes widened. You're outing me?" "Correct," she said. "The world needs to see who they tried to destroy. A young black man who built a system smart enough to stop the largest digital fraud ring in U.S. history, and still got treated like a threat for buying an iPad." The agent from the SUV smiled softly. "They called you a thief. Turns out you were catching thieves all along." For a moment, Elijah didn't speak. His reflection in the monitor looked older somehow. Not from time, but from truth. He whispered, almost to himself, "All I ever wanted was to be seen for what I do." "Not what I look like." The director turned to him. "Then let's make sure they never forget it." A pause. The hum of the room filled the silence. Electric, alive. "Ma'am," Elijah said, his voice low but steady. "Then I'm ready for whatever comes next." That night, while the world replayed shaky cell phone clips and argued online, a quiet storm was building inside the Bureau. By morning, the entire narrative would flip. The boy in handcuffs was about to become the headline hero, and every person who doubted him, every guard, every whisper, every racist comment, was about to face a truth money couldn't erase. Because Elijah Brooks wasn't just the kid from the mall. He was the reason the country still had a functioning cyber defense grid, and the world was finally about to know it. By dawn, the clip was everywhere. TikTok, Twitter, CNN, Fox. Even the morning shows that usually avoided controversy couldn't look away. The caption under the trending video read, "Mall security tackles innocent black teen, then 10 federal agents show up." No one knew Elijah's name yet, but everyone knew his face. The clip started the same way it had ended the night before. A trembling phone camera, a crowd shouting, the sound of concrete shoes scraping against the tiled mall floor. You could hear someone yelling, "Stop resisting!" Then came the freeze frame, the moment 10 armed federal agents appeared out of nowhere and surrounded the officers. And then, silence. The next 3 seconds changed everything. One of the agents turned to the crowd and said, "Step back. You're interfering with a federal operation." Another addressed the head of mall security. "This man is under federal protection. You're detaining a classified operative." Every person watching the clip could see it. The look on those guards' faces as realization hit. The disbelief, the fear, the dawning horror of what they'd just done. By the time the video hit the morning feeds, it had already passed 50 million views. They called him criminal. They called him, "Sir, apologize to Elijah," all trending worldwide before sunrise. Inside the Bureau's control room, Elijah sat in stunned silence, watching it unfold in real time. Every feed, every replay, every slow-motion breakdown of the moment he went from suspect to sir. His phone buzzed non-stop. Reporters, classmates, even strangers sending thousands of messages. Some were angry. Most were heartbroken. "I showed my son this clip," he cried. "The way they looked at him like he didn't belong. I've lived that." The moment that agent said, "Sir," I swear I felt something shift. Elijah turned off his phone. He couldn't look anymore. He sat alone in a dim corner office. His FBI badge on the desk, still half unreal, still heavy with a story no one knew the full truth of yet. Director Lang walked in quietly, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. "You're famous," she said. "Not the kind of famous anyone wants," Elijah replied. Lang sat across from him. "You didn't ask for this, but sometimes history doesn't wait for permission." Elijah stared out the window, at the morning light hitting the Potomac like shards of gold. "They only see the part where I was tackled," he murmured. "They don't see the nights I stayed up building that system. The years of being told I'd never belong." Lang nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time they did." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, his full declassification order. "Effective immediately," she said. "You're cleared to speak publicly about your work. The Bureau wants transparency. The world wants answers. You're the only one who can tell this story." Elijah's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the papers. For years, his work had been buried under layers of classified protocol. Now the walls were coming down. Lang stood. "There's a press conference in 3 hours. We'll support whatever you choose to say. But make no mistake, how you handle this moment will echo far beyond you." As she left, Elijah exhaled deeply. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't even afraid. He was tired, but ready. By 11 a.m., every major network had cameras set up outside the Bureau's press room. Reporters whispered speculation. Was the kid in the viral video some kind of agent? A hacker? A whistleblower? Then the doors opened. Elijah stepped onto the stage in a navy suit that still hung slightly loose on his frame. He didn't look like a secret agent. He looked like a young man who'd seen too much, too soon. He adjusted the microphone. The murmurs faded. "When I walked into that mall yesterday," he began softly, "I was just trying to buy a gift for my little sister's birthday." He paused, the tremor in his voice both real and grounding. "What happened after? You all saw it. I was profiled, judged, humiliated, for existing in the wrong skin, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. You could hear cameras clicking, but no one dared interrupt. But what you didn't see," he continued, "is why those agents were there. I work with the Bureau's Cyber Intelligence Division. My team develops AI systems that identify global financial crimes, systems designed to protect the very people who thought I didn't belong." The room went dead, silent. "I built the algorithm that stopped a billion-dollar laundering network last month. And yet yesterday, I couldn't convince 3 mall guards that I was more than their stereotype. He looked straight into the cameras. That's the part that hurts. Not the tackle. Not the cuffs. But how quickly some people decided I didn't deserve respect. A hush fell over the press room. Then he said it. The line that would replay across every platform for days. I don't want revenge. I just want you to see what happens when prejudice gets in the way of purpose. The story exploded. By afternoon, the clip of his speech had more views than the original incident. Churches, universities, and corporations began sharing it as a lesson in humility and bias. Even the mall security chief publicly apologized on live television, voice shaking. We failed that young man, not because of our procedures, but because of our perceptions. By evening, Elijah's name wasn't just a hashtag. It was a movement. See, Elijah became a call to action, used by teachers, police departments, and even CEOs to start conversations about unconscious bias and underestimated potential. For the first time, America wasn't just angry, it was listening. That night, Elijah sat with his sister Layla on their apartment balcony. The city glowed below them. Loud, messy, alive. "You okay, Eli?" she asked, resting her head on his shoulder. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, just wish Mom could see this." "She can," Layla said softly. "She'd be proud." Elijah looked out at the skyline, quiet for a long moment. "You know what's funny?" he said finally. "They called me a criminal yesterday, and today they call me a hero. But I'm the same person I was both days." Layla smiled. "That's how you know you're real," he laughed, the first real laugh since the mall. Then he whispered almost to himself, "They called me Sir, but the truth is I'm just getting started." By morning, Elijah wasn't just a trending name, he was a headline. Every network wanted an interview. Every influencer wanted a quote. Every corporation wanted his face attached to their diversity initiative, the clip of him saying, "I don't want revenge. I just want you to see what happens when prejudice gets in the way of purpose," had been replayed over 100 million times. America couldn't stop talking about him. The young black man tackled in a mall, then saluted by federal agents. But fame, Elijah soon learned, wasn't freedom, it was noise. And behind the noise came the vultures. That Tuesday morning, the Bureau's PR department called him into an emergency meeting. "We have to control the narrative," said the communications director, a polished woman in a gray suit who spoke like every word had been rehearsed twice. "You're the face of accountability right now. If we don't step up, someone else will twist your story." Lang leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "He doesn't owe anyone a soundbite," she said flatly. The PR director frowned. "He owes the truth, Director. And right now the public is demanding it." Elijah sat quietly at the end of the table, watching them argue over his life like he wasn't even there. His badge, the one that had cost him years of sacrifice, suddenly felt like a prop. He wasn't a person anymore. He was a symbol. When the meeting ended, Lang placed a hand on his shoulder. "Don't let them turn your story into their slogan," she murmured. "You didn't survive that moment to make someone's press kit look better." Elijah nodded. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "Decide what you want this to mean," Lang said, "before someone else decides for you." That evening, Elijah got a call from a number he didn't recognize. When he answered, the voice on the other end was smooth, confident, dripping with old money. "Mr. Cole, my name's Brandon Rourke. I run the Rourke Foundation for Innovation and Equality. I think we should talk." Rourke was a billionaire philanthropist. One of those men who smiled for magazine covers and gave TED talks about bridging divides. He invited Elijah to dinner at his penthouse overlooking the city skyline. Against Lang's warning, Elijah went. When he arrived, Rourke greeted him like an old friend. "Elijah, my boy, you're the most inspiring story in America right now. Sit, please. Let's make history together." The dining table was covered in crystal and silver, everything gleaming, sterile, and cold. Rourke poured 2 glasses of wine and slid a glossy folder across the table. "Here's what I'm proposing," he said. "We start the Cole Initiative, A program to help underprivileged youth learn coding and cybersecurity. You'll be the face. I'll handle the funding. You get a platform. America gets its redemption story. Elijah flipped through the folder. It was perfect. Too perfect. Brand logos, partnerships, his image already mocked up on billboards. How long have you been working on this? He asked. Rourke smiled. Since 3 a.m. the night you went viral. Elijah stared at the folder again and realized what it really was. Not a proposal, a claim. This wasn't about helping kids. It was about owning his narrative, turning his trauma into someone else's marketing plan. Rourke leaned in. Think about it, son. You'll be rich, respected, protected. You'll never have to fight for a seat at the table again because you'll have your own. For a long moment, Elijah didn't speak. Then he looked up, calm but unyielding. I didn't survive that night to sell my story, he said softly. I want to change the story, Rourke blinked. Change it how? By building tables that don't need gatekeepers, by teaching kids that the system that almost broke me isn't the only one they can build in. Rourke smiled thinly. Idealism doesn't scale, Elijah. Partnership does. Then maybe I'm not building what you're selling, Elijah replied, standing up. Rourke's charm cracked just for a second. You'll regret this, he said. People forget fast. Your 15 minutes are already ticking. Elijah smiled faintly. Then I'll build something that lasts longer than 15 minutes. He walked out, leaving the contract and the wine untouched. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. The city lights blurred through his exhaustion, but his purpose felt crystal clear. He wasn't going to be someone's symbol. He wasn't going to cash in on pain. He was going to build something real, something that outlived the headlines. That night, Elijah opened his laptop and began sketching a new idea. A network, not for fame, not for profit. For access, the Bridge Project, a platform connecting kids from underfunded schools to mentors in tech and federal security, free coding programs, free workshops, anonymous scholarships. He called Lang the next morning. I'm going to need help, he said. She smiled through the phone. You'll have it. The right kind this time. Weeks passed. The media cycle moved on, chasing new outrage. But something else began quietly spreading. One story, one kid, one connection at a time. A teenager in Detroit wrote, because of the Bridge Project, I'm learning cybersecurity. Mr. Cole, I want to be like you one day. Another from Texas. They said girls can't code. I proved them wrong, thanks to your program. Elijah read every message, often in silence, sometimes through tears. He didn't respond to all of them. But he carried them all. Each word was proof that pain could become purpose, that humiliation could become hope, that sometimes the bridge between two worlds isn't built from concrete, but from courage. It was a gray Saturday morning when Elijah Cole finally went back. The mall hadn't changed much. Same marble floors, same echo of soft music, same faint smell of pretzels and perfume mixing in the air. But he wasn't the same man who'd been thrown face first into that floor months ago. Back then, he'd walked in carrying nothing but a broken phone and a backpack. Now he carried something heavier, not guilt or anger, but purpose. The Bridge Project had taken off faster than anyone predicted. What started as a small idea between him and Director Lang had turned into a national network of youth mentorship programs, backed by educators, local agencies, and even a few quiet allies in Washington. But that's not why he came back. He came because sometimes, to build a new story, you have to stand where the old one ended. The same security desk stood near the entrance, polished chrome, gleaming under the skylight. 2 guards were posted there, one of them instantly recognizable. The man's face stiffened when he looked up. For a moment, Elijah thought he might not remember. Then he did. The guard's eyes widened, his jaw tightening as memory collided with the present. Elijah could almost hear the echoes. Get on the ground! Still haunting the space between them, but today, Elijah wore a tailored Navy suit and carried himself with the calm assurance of someone who had nothing left to prove. He nodded politely. Morning, the guard swallowed hard. Mr. Cole, I didn't think that you'd see me again, Elijah offered gently. Neither did I. Silence stretched between them, awkward, heavy, human. People passed by, glancing curiously but not stopping. Elijah placed a card on the counter. The Bridge Project's hosting a youth tech fair here next weekend. We've rented the East Atrium. Kids from 6 schools are coming to showcase their work. You're welcome to stop by. The guard looked down at the card like it was made of glass. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For that day. For what we did. Elijah's expression didn't waver. I know. He paused, then added, You did what you thought was right, because someone taught you what danger looks like. I just hope next time you see a young black man with a laptop, you don't see a threat. You see potential. The guard nodded, eyes wet, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, sir. That last word, sir, carried a weight no apology could match. It wasn't just respect. It was recognition. As Elijah walked deeper into the mall, passing the same fountain where he'd once been pinned to the tiles, he felt a strange peace settle in his chest. The spot was quieter now, the chaos long gone, but in his mind he could still hear the crowd's murmurs, the officers' shouts, the cold clatter of handcuffs. He stopped by the railing, took a slow breath, and smiled faintly. Then he pulled out his phone and hit record. This is where it happened, he said softly, looking into the camera, where a misunderstanding almost ruined a life, where fear spoke louder than truth. But I came back. Not for revenge, not for validation, but to show what healing looks like. He turned the camera toward the atrium behind him. Next week, this same space will be filled with kids coding, building robots, dreaming without fear. The same floor that saw humiliation will now see innovation. The same air that held hate will hold hope. He paused, his voice steady but his eyes bright. So if you're watching this, and you've ever been told you don't belong, come stand where they said you couldn't, not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. He ended the video, uploaded it instantly. Within hours, it spread again, not with outrage this time, but awe. Full circle, one commenter wrote. Grace under fire, said another. Now that's what leadership looks like, said a retired teacher from Ohio. The following weekend, the East Atrium came alive. Rows of tables lined with laptops, LED lights, and excited faces. Kids wearing Bridge Project t-shirts ran around helping visitors try out their mini drones and encryption games. Director Lang stood at the back, watching with quiet pride as Elijah moved through the crowd, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a builder. At one booth, a teenage girl shyly tugged his sleeve. Mr. Cole, can I show you something? She pulled up a small program she'd written, an AI model that helped detect bias in surveillance footage. Elijah blinked. You wrote this? She nodded proudly. Started after I saw your story. I wanted to build something that keeps what happened to you from happening again. He stared at the screen, speechless for a moment. Then he smiled. You just did. The girl grinned, and in that instant, Elijah saw the future. Not just his, but everyone's. A future not built on fear or fame, but on faith. As the day wound down, Lang joined him by the fountain. Feels poetic, doesn't it? She said. The same place that tried to break you now holds your legacy. Elijah chuckled softly. Funny how that works. Maybe some stories don't end. They just evolve. Lang tilted her head. What's next for you, Cole? He looked around, at the kids laughing, at the old security guard watching quietly from the corner, at the sunlight reflecting off the polished tiles where his blood once stained the floor. Next? Elijah said, smiling. We build bridges so strong that no one ever needs rescuing again. Lang nodded. Then I guess your story just became everyone's. The camera lingers on Elijah as he watches the kids, his posture calm, his eyes thoughtful, his presence commanding without trying to be. Then his voice fades in, the same steady tone that once silenced a mall full of chaos. They called me a criminal once, but that was before 10 agents called me sir, and before the next generation called me teacher. The video wasn't meant to go viral. Elijah had filmed it on impulse, a simple message about healing, a symbolic gesture of closure. He thought maybe a few hundred people from the Bridge Project community would see it. He was wrong. Within 12 hours, the clip hit 1 million views. By the end of the weekend, it had crossed 25 million. The hashtag #StandWhereTheyFell trended worldwide. It wasn't anger that made it viral this time. It was peace. Clips of Elijah standing by the same fountain where he'd once been tackled now played across every social media platform, news channel, and talk show. The image of him, calm, composed, speaking gently to the guard who once handcuffed him, became the face of a new kind of protest, not the loud kind. The lasting kind, news anchors replayed his words. I came back. Not for revenge. Not for validation, but to show what healing looks like. They analyzed his tone, his choice of words, his decision to forgive. Psychologists called it transformational empathy. Pastors called it grace under fire. Teachers called it a masterclass in emotional intelligence. And ordinary Americans, mothers, veterans, students, called it inspiring. One comment thread under the video grew into something unexpected. People began posting about their own mall moments. A Latina nurse who'd been accused of stealing medical supplies before she became chief of staff. A teen who'd been suspended for looking suspicious, now an engineering major at MIT. Middle-aged veteran who'd been profiled at an airport, only to return years later as a federal consultant. Each story ended the same way. I stood where they said I didn't belong. Now I stand tall. The internet didn't just share Elijah's message, it expanded it. By midweek, the Bridge Project's inbox flooded with donations. Small-town schools from Mississippi to Maine asked to partner. Corporations reached out offering grants. Even the FBI's Public Affairs Office posted a statement, acknowledging Mr. Cole's extraordinary example of resilience and leadership. Director? Lang's phone never stopped ringing. Elijah, she said breathlessly one morning, waving a tablet filled with notifications. You've started something we can't even measure. CNN wants a live interview. The White House wants to feature the Bridge Project in next month's Community Innovation Summit. Elijah blinked, still grounded. I didn't plan any of this. Lang smiled softly. That's what makes it real. You didn't chase fame, you chased healing. People can feel that difference. But not everyone celebrated. A few voices still tried to twist the narrative. Talk show pundits questioned whether the story had been exaggerated. Some said Elijah was too forgiving. Others claimed it was a PR stunt. He didn't answer any of them. He didn't need to, because truth doesn't argue, it endures. And every time someone replayed the clip of that trembling security guard whispering, "Yes, sir," the critics went quiet again. 2 weeks later, the New York Times published a front-page story titled, From Handcuffs to Hashtags, The Man Who Turned Humiliation into Hope. They included a photograph. Elijah standing at the mall fountain, sunlight pouring over him like absolution. The caption read, they called him a criminal. He called them to be better. That image became the emblem of the movement. Artists painted murals of it on city walls. Students printed it on protest banners. Churches projected it during Sunday sermons. And for the first time in a long time, the country wasn't just talking about injustice. It was talking about grace. That winter, Elijah was invited to speak at the National Forum for Social Leadership, an event that brought together educators, business leaders, and policymakers. He almost said no. Crowds still made him uneasy. But Lang insisted. They need to hear it from you, she said. Not from headlines, from your heart. The night of the event, the hall was packed. Rows of journalists filled the back. In the front sat government officials, community activists, and even the same FBI agents who'd defended him that day. As Elijah stepped up to the podium, the applause was thunderous, not because he was famous, but because he was proof. He waited for the noise to settle. Then he began, quietly. I was tackled once for carrying a laptop. Today I build bridges with it. The difference isn't luck. It's people who believed in something better than fear. The audience fell silent. He spoke not with bitterness, but with conviction. About what happens when empathy replaces ego, when forgiveness becomes more revolutionary than fury, When justice looks like understanding, every word hit deep, especially for the older listeners who'd lived through decades of division and change. He ended with the same line from his viral video. "The future isn't waiting for us to grow up. It's waiting for us to listen up." The crowd rose to its feet, not with cheers, but with tears. Afterward, as Elijah left the stage, Lang met him in the wings, eyes glistening. "You did it," she whispered. "You turned pain into power." He smiled faintly. "No," he said, "we did. All of us who decided to keep showing up, even when the world told us we didn't belong. And somewhere, deep in the crowd, the same security guard from the mall stood watching, a quiet man with a simple expression of peace. He didn't ask for a selfie. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said everything. "Thank you for not giving up on us." The movement kept growing, slowly, quietly, lastingly. But for Elijah, it wasn't about viral fame or headlines anymore. It was about the small things, a teacher giving a second chance to a misunderstood student, a store clerk choosing kindness over suspicion, a cop pausing before assuming the worst. Those were the real victories, and they started with one moment of grace that refused to die. The applause faded days ago, but the echoes stayed. Elijah Cole sat alone in his apartment long after midnight, the city humming softly outside his window. The glow from the streetlights stretched across his desk, illuminating stacks of letters, hundreds of them, from strangers who'd written after watching his story. Some were typed on clean white paper, some handwritten in shaky cursive. Some came from teenagers. Many came from grandparents. "You reminded me of the son I lost," one woman had written in blue ink. "He would have been your age. You gave me peace." Another, from a retired police officer in Kansas, read, "I spent 40 years in the force. I saw too many young men treated like you were. I wish I could go back and undo every one of those moments. But I can't. So I'll start by doing better now." Elijah read them all, every word, his eyes lingering on the signatures, the evidence of hearts changing, one story at a time. He smiled faintly, and then slowly the smile faded. Because for every letter of gratitude, there was another one that reopened wounds. Messages from people who still didn't believe, who called him a liar, who said forgiveness was weakness, who said he made them look bad by being calm when he should have been angry. Forgiveness might have set him free, but it didn't protect him from the ache. That night, he dreamed of the tackle, the sound of boots rushing toward him, the weight pressing his chest into the cold tile, the laughter, sharp, cruel, echoing across marble floors. He woke up drenched in sweat, the phantom sound of those cuffs clinking still ringing in his ears. For all the peace he projected to the world, Elijah carried that sound everywhere he went. It lived in his chest like an old scar that never stopped aching when the weather changed. In the daylight, he was calm, articulate, admired. At night, he wrestled with the cost of being the man everyone wanted him to be, patient, kind, forgiving, unbreakable. He wasn't any of those things all the time. Some nights he wasn't sure he wanted to be. He wanted to rage, to shout, to demand the apologies he never got. But when he tried to imagine it, he saw the faces of the people who'd written to him, the veterans, the mothers, the young men who said his strength had given them hope. And he couldn't let himself fall apart. Not yet. One Friday, months after the speech, he returned to the mall alone. No cameras, no press, just him and the sound of the fountain. He stood in the same spot where it all began, watching water spill in silver threads over polished stone. There were new faces at the security desk, young guards, laughing quietly, sipping coffee. They didn't recognize him. For the first time, Elijah felt invisible again. And strangely, it felt like peace. He whispered under his breath. "You did it. You turned the pain into purpose." But even as he said it, a tear slipped down his cheek. Because purpose never erases pain. It just teaches you how to carry it with grace. That night, he visited his mother's grave for the first time in months. He brought white lilies, her favorite. He sat beside the headstone and spoke softly, as if she could still hear him. I kept my promise, Mama. You told me never to let them make me small. I didn't fight with anger. I fought with peace. I think you'd like that. The wind brushed through the trees, scattering leaves around his feet. He looked up at the night sky, quiet, deep, endless. And for the first time in a long time, he felt her there. He remembered how she used to say, "The hardest thing about forgiveness isn't doing it once. It's choosing it again every day." She was right. Forgiveness wasn't an event. It was a discipline, a constant, exhausting choice, and Elijah was still learning how to make it without losing himself in the process. A few days later, Director Lang found him sitting in the bridge project's empty office, staring at the floor. "Elijah," she said gently, "you look tired." He laughed quietly. "I think I'm finally feeling everything I tried not to feel when it happened." Lang sat beside him. "You're allowed to. You carried the weight for the world. Now let it rest for a while." He nodded. "I just don't know how." Lang looked at him the way only someone who truly believes in you can. "Start by remembering you're human before you're a symbol. The world may need the hero, but you need healing too." Her words landed like truth and mercy wrapped together. He exhaled. "Maybe healing's not about forgetting," he said softly. "Maybe it's about remembering without breaking." Lang smiled. "Then you're already doing it." That evening, Elijah wrote in his journal, something he hadn't done in years. The page filled slowly with quiet thoughts. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It redeems it. But redemption has a cost. Loneliness, misunderstanding, doubt. Still, it's worth it. Because the moment you choose grace over rage, you take power away from the hate that tried to define you. He paused, then added one last line. "Grace is heavy, but it's still the better weight to carry." He closed the book, set it on his desk, and turned off the light. The city outside kept glowing, soft and constant. Elijah finally let the silence wrap around him, not as emptiness but as peace earned the hard way. A year later, the same city that once watched Elijah Cole pinned to the ground gathered to watch him honored in the nation's capital. The marble hall shimmered under the warm glow of chandeliers, cameras lining every angle. Reporters whispered about how quickly his story had spread, went from humiliation at a mall to headlines that changed national policy. The event was titled, "Voices of Integrity, When Courage Redefines." Justice. Elijah wasn't supposed to attend at first. He didn't like attention. He'd already turned down morning shows, podcast tours, and lucrative speaking contracts. But when Director Lang told him the Bureau wanted to dedicate a new youth mentorship division in his name, the Cole Initiative for Ethical Policing and Civil Collaboration, he realized it wasn't about him anymore. It was about the next generation who'd watch his story and learn that dignity is not weakness, and grace is not surrender. When he stepped up to the podium, the audience rose instinctively, not for celebrity, but for respect. A slow, rising wave of applause filled the chamber, echoing through columns and history itself. He waited until the last clap faded before speaking. His voice, steady and low, carried further than microphones ever could. "A year ago, I was just a man trying to buy a birthday gift for my sister. Today, I'm standing here because a few people decided to look twice and see truth instead of headlines." He paused, scanning the crowd. Front row, his mother's best friend sat clutching her handkerchief, eyes wet. Behind her, a cluster of young FBI trainees watched in absolute silence. That day at the mall, I learned something I'll never forget. Sometimes, the real test of character isn't how you act when you're believed. It's how you behave when the whole world decides you're guilty before you speak. A few heads bowed. Others nodded quietly, tears forming in corners of proud eyes. I could have chosen anger. God knows it would have been justified. But anger doesn't rebuild trust. It burns it down. And this country doesn't need another fire. It needs light. The audience went still. It wasn't a performance. It was truth. Unpolished, heavy, and real. He took a deep breath. They called me a criminal. But 10 agents called me sir. And that moment wasn't about revenge. It was about revelation, that respect shouldn't come from a badge or a title. It should come from our shared humanity. A soft murmur rippled through the room. Even the stoic security officers guarding the door stood a little taller. Elijah continued, voice thick with emotion. When those agents surrounded me, I realized something. They weren't saving me. They were saving what this country could still be. He looked directly into the cameras. To every young man or woman watching this who's ever been doubted, feared, or underestimated, don't let their fear decide your worth. Don't let their ignorance silence your dignity. You don't have to match their hate to prove your humanity. The hall erupted in applause, not polite but cathartic. It was as if the audience itself was seeking redemption through him. After the ceremony, as dignitaries gathered for photos, Elijah slipped away to the side of the stage. He wasn't there for the cameras. He was there for the kids. A group of teenagers from underfunded schools had been invited as guests. They waited quietly, holding notebooks and shy smiles. One young boy, maybe 16, stepped forward. His voice trembled. "Mr. Cole, when they tackled you, I saw my brother. But when you forgave them, I saw who I want to be." Elijah knelt, meeting his eyes. "You don't have to carry their hate to prove your strength, son. Just keep walking with your head up. One day they'll see what they missed." The boy nodded, eyes glistening. Director Lang watched from a distance, pride shining through the fatigue in her eyes. Later that night, Elijah returned to his quiet apartment, the same one with the letters still neatly stacked. He opened one envelope he hadn't touched before. It was from the lead officer who'd tackled him that day. The handwriting was shaky, like the hand that wrote it trembled. "I've watched your speech more times than I can admit. I'm not proud of what I did. I was scared and I acted like a coward. But your grace, it made me want to be a better man. I'm back in training now, working with your initiative. Thank you for seeing the human in me when I couldn't even see it myself." Elijah folded the letter carefully, placed it back in its envelope, and whispered, "That's what forgiveness is for." Months passed. The Cole Initiative grew into a national network. Police academies integrated empathy modules based on his case. Graduates learned not only to protect lives, but to see them. Elijah declined every political offer that followed. He didn't want power. He wanted perspective. He believed change wasn't written in laws, but in how people treated the unseen. He started visiting schools, community centers, even prisons, telling his story not as a victim or hero, but as a reminder that sometimes the people the world dismisses are the very ones sent to heal it. One afternoon, he stood outside that same mall, now renovated, brighter, livelier. The fountain sparkled in the sun. A new plaque stood near the entrance, in honor of Elijah Cole, whose grace turned injustice into change. He stared at it for a long moment, then smiled softly. A young girl tugged on her mother's sleeve nearby, pointing. "Mom, who's that man?" Her mother read the plaque aloud, then said quietly, "Someone who chose kindness when the world gave him every reason not to." The girl thought for a second, then nodded. "I want to be like him." Elijah turned, walking toward the sunlight with quiet gratitude, because after all the pain, all the loss, all the noise, he finally understood what his mother once told him. The greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving that hate could never make you forget who you are. They called him a criminal, until 10 agents called him sir. But in truth, Elijah Cole never needed their titles, their apologies, or their headlines. Because real power isn't in how loudly the world praises you after it breaks you. It's in how quietly you rebuild without becoming what broke you. Share this story if you believe dignity still wins. Comment if you've ever seen someone judged before they were understood. And remember, the next time you see someone being dismissed, you might be looking at the very person who'll remind the world what grace looks like.